And now a quick clarification before we continue with the sponsor perspective portion of our program. While this next interview is being conducted by me and the questions are mine, this content should not be considered editorial. With that, I'm joined by Priscilla Almodovar, CEO of Enterprise Community Partners. So glad to be with you. And I want to just understand, or get for most Americans watching this right now, to understand the dashboard of why affordable housing ought to be a priority for them.
Yeah, today for most Americans, their housing expense is the largest expense in their budget. That means that there's less resources to pay their medical bills, less resources for food, for clothing, and honestly, discretionary income that they could otherwise spend in the economy. Today, we have 11 million renters, and 1 in 4 spend 50% of their income on housing. There's not one county in the United States today that if you're a single parent working full-time on a minimum wage that you could afford a 2-bedroom apartment. That's something that one of our colleagues at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition just reported. So it is a huge issue for families. And if someone is not stably housed, it impacts their health, it impacts their opportunities, and it's something that is often overlooked, but it might be one of the more important issues facing our country today.
What is the connection between COVID-19 today and the affordable housing scene?
We were already facing a housing affordability crisis before COVID, and people who were housing unstable were already facing worse health outcomes than others. People who were already unstably housed did not have broadband access. What COVID has done, it just shed of light on what are many of the underlying issues that are happening today in our country. We have low-income workers who, before COVID, we call low-income workers. Today, they're the essential workers. And those are the workers that, throughout this public health crisis, have been going to work, exposing themselves to the virus. We also see that low-income workers were the first ones to either be furloughed or laid off. So what COVID has done is just exacerbated the issue that has been impacted low-income families across the country from an economic devastation perspective, from a health perspective. And I think the other thing that's shed light is what children and students are going through. The digital divide, the educational divide, trying to learn and do remote learning. It has just shown a bright light on so many issues that are impacting low-income communities today.
How are renters in this scene that you've just, it sounds so bleak, but how are they coping in this time? And how are you working with them?
You know, renters today are in a really difficult situation. And at Enterprise, we are very concerned. We have a stalled stimulus package. We know from renters that it was the stimulus payments, it was the temporary unemployment benefits that have been helping them get through this economic crisis. There are surveys that say that renters today are worried about paying their rent next month, and it is those payments that have been helping them get through this crisis. What we're worried about is an eviction moratorium and all of these stopgap measures that we've put in place during this public health crisis. They're just a Band-Aid. An eviction moratorium does not mean that it's rent forgiveness. These rents will have to be paid. Where's the money coming from? When a family can't pay their rent, they face eviction potentially, and really devastatingly, potentially homelessness. So we are very concerned today that renters need emergency rental assistance, because that is what has gotten them through this crisis.
Now, you have a very full 360-degree view, better than I do, of this affordability crisis today. And I'm just interested in what federal programs are out there that you think matter most in assisting this community.
Yeah, so it's not a one-stop solution when it comes to housing. We have urban, we have suburban and rural communities across the country. But we do know that we have a supply issue and we have an affordability issue. So there are some programs that have worked very successfully. One of them is the low income housing tax credit. It is a proven national production program that helps build affordable housing. It passed in 1986. It is the most effective tool to produce new units of housing and to preserve the existing affordable housing that we have. There's also the New Markets Tax Credit. It's a way to bring in private investment capital into distressed communities across the country. Again, allowing communities to decide what type of critical infrastructure they need. Is it more medical services? Is it more charter schools? Is it supermarkets? And very flexible in bringing private capital into distressed areas. Another one would be the home program. HUD has many excellent programs, but the home program is probably the most flexible in as much as it allows localities, state governments to decide what are the unique housing needs for their particular jurisdictions. So there's also Section 8 vouchers, which it gives individuals a choice as to where they want to live. So there are a number of production programs that help on the supply side, but there are also demand programs like the Section 8 housing vouchers that give individuals choice of where they would like to live.
Priscilla, I've interviewed a lot of mayors, Republican and Democrat, and one of the biggest issues that they're trying to deal with is the legacy of racism and racial disparity and injustice. And I'm interested in the role that enterprise plays in the housing dimensions of those divides. What are you doing in this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So thank you for asking it. If we are to have a honest conversation in this country about poverty and addressing racial inequalities, we need to talk about housing. We need to talk about the history of our country's housing policies at the federal level, at the state and local levels. Think of redlining, think of restrictive covenants, deed covenants. So we can't talk about racial equity and housing equity if we don't address the generational discriminatory practices that have occurred in our country. And at Enterprise, we do bring an end-to-end view. We are the only national end-to-end affordable housing organization that does both policy advocacy work, we bring capital to areas, and we also have programs. And at Enterprise, when you look at our mission, we need to confront the legacy of systemic racism in housing. And it's only then that we will be able to address what the facts are. Look at the facts. Black households today are 2 times more likely to be renters than white households. When you look at the home ownership gap, Black households compared to white households, there's a 30% gap. When you look at the homelessness population, Black Americans make up 13% of our population, yet they make 40% of the people who are homeless. So the facts speak for themselves. I think as a country to move forward, to address the root causes of the income inequality, the wealth gap that we're seeing, and honestly, just interracial poverty, we need to address housing. And Enterprise is very committed to working with all levels of government, all stakeholders to address this issue, because it's only then that we'll be able to create these communities that are communities of opportunity, that are mixed income, that are diverse, where every one of us has the ability to reach our human potential.
Well, Priscilla Almodovar, CEO of Enterprise Community Partners, thanks so much for sharing those important thoughts with us today and for supporting today's program. We really appreciate it.
Great to be here.